Nothing is grounded except through the station ground, which is to say the 220 ground the linear is looking at. And the other end is just a big honking piece of wire. I'd say 170 or so feet. And it resonates almost every place you want it to resonate. I don't know how it does it. And, I got a degree in engineering. And I'm an extra class, right? Worked my way up through, did all the code, did all theory. I'm supposed to know this stuff, I think. But this thing just sits there 45 feet up in the trees and it works. That's all I can tell you.
Well, I know a lot about that situation. My second antenna, my backup that I use here occasionally, is a 160-meter version of your antenna. It's 260 feet long on the end of my antenna's 75-to-1 ratio transformer that's rated at 4 kilowatts, and it is at the end of about 300 feet of coax, far away from my primary antenna, which is a 600-foot horizontal loop up about 65 feet here on average. And that end-fed half-wave works quite well. It's a very low noise receive antenna. Transmit, it never outperforms the loop, except in your direction. I could switch to it, but I have to tune it. It comes into port 3 of my HF Auto here, the Palstar HF Auto, and I have to take a few seconds to tune it. But it's a great secondary antenna. It shoots up about 75 feet to the top of a pine tree, then goes out flat top for the remaining distance, ties off at another pine tree, that's 75, 100 feet away. And I'm surprised at how well it works. It really is a pretty cool idea. It's like W8JI explains. Very simple concept. A half-wave wire will radiate exactly the same no matter where you feed it, the middle, the end, 3/4 from the end. Doesn't matter. It will radiate. The voltage and current patterns on that half-wave wire will always be exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the challenge of actually feeding it, because at the end you have very high voltage, a low current point, high voltage point. So, the impedance, looking at basic Ohm's law, the impedance at the feed point is just so incredibly high, probably around 3,000 ohms, which until, inexpensive ferrite cores came along, was hard to load to, but now these ferrite transformers are pretty inexpensive and you can build them, and it's remarkable. They work very well.
That's probably the best explanation I've ever heard. So, I have to say I'm fairly consistently amazed by this thing, and that's a great explanation. But anyway, it works. So my hope is I get this FBO sold. So I just started business brokering 6 months ago, 5 months ago, and if this deal pops the way I'm hoping it'll pop, I'm going to make a pretty substantial income. So my goal is to find myself probably a 60-ish foot self-supporting tower. So I moved here just over a year ago. So this new QTH is we're at about 300 feet above sea level. And we've got a lot of hills here in this part of Maine. But, yeah, we love it. And got the altitude, so I think, yeah, maybe. With this kind of height, maybe only 60 feet is going to be plenty. And I'm looking at the Monster IR, the bruiser. That's, I think it's 4 elements through 40. And probably going to buy I've got an old tail twister, but I'm not sure. I probably should pull it apart and rebuild it, but I really don't want to. I'm just kind of in the mood to buy something new if that big commission comes through. I know it's lazy, and I don't care. So that's kind of where I am. So, and then hopefully I'll get something up on top of that for 6. Maybe a small Yagi for 6, and something for 2 and 440 above that. And I might, because I'm only going to have the one tower. I don't want to push it too hard. I might do something with satellites, because they've always kind of amazed me back in the days that I worked RS-7, RS-8, the robots. They were cute, they were amazing, they were entertaining, but that's about all you can say about them. Anyway, back to you, KS1C.
Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck in that endeavor. I hope it comes through to you and you get to play amateur radio and do that. It is on my agenda to get a tower here. I just haven't got around to it. I think because when I moved here, we were really going into this sunspot low, and it was just. I didn't foresee a lot of operations on 20, 15, or 10, so I just concentrated here on 160, 80, and 40, which is really throughout my entire hamming career where I spent most of my time. I did very little work on 20, 15, or 10, the occasional QSO, but I would love to put up a large tower and put a Yagi up there, and who wouldn't want that big step IR monster IR? It would be a wonderful, wonderful antenna, and it would seem to me that would work very well for you up in Maine, and someday I'll get around to it. I am working a second career, although I am retired law enforcement. I now work a second career with a private company that does Homeland Security interoperability communications. We have a lot of government, federal, and state and local customers. So that's what I do in some of my spare time. I work from home, so the pandemic didn't change anything. I've been with this company now ever since I retired. When I retired, I got recruited, so I've been with them about 13 years. And that's how I sustain this hobby, with a couple bucks I make from that, and just like improving the station along the way. Since I don't have to spend that money on aviation, I got to tell you, if you want to go through money quick, buy an airplane.
I have perceived that, the KS1C here. Yeah, so the increments of expense for your typical quarter 20 bolt go automotive, marine, and then aviation. So automotive is cheap. You can buy a quarter 20 bolt for probably 8 cents. Marine, wow, this is a marine rated bolt. This is a great bolt. It's marine rated, and this is going to be from 8 cents to maybe 30 cents. But if you go to aviation, it's like, oh, no. This is a quarter 20 bolt. I don't know if you can hear me. I hope you can, but I'm just not copying anything. It sounds like something broke, like we popped a breaker, the radio decided not to be a radio anymore. Don't know what happened. Can't hear it all. NJ2US, KS1C.
Yeah, sorry, I accidentally bumped the VFO, hit a button, and I lost my VFO, and so I think that happened very early in the transmission.
You should feel bad because I have personally never ever made a mistake before, so you should feel horrible.
Yeah, it's hard to admit, and so now I'm totally humbled by your lack of accidents in your hamming career. I was just commenting that we go by aviation monetary units, AMUs, and the last thing that broke on my airplane cost 0.8 AMU.
I don't even know if I want to ask the question. What's the value of an AMU?
$1,000 per aviation monetary unit.
That reminds me, I've never had a plane, but I've had a boat, and my observation was you cannot get in and out of West Marine for anything. If you go in to buy a 35-cent fuse, you're going to spend $100 before you get out the door. Minimum $100 just to show up. Good.
Oh no, that's why owning the aircraft for 24 years, it started to become, people used to ask me, isn't it expensive? I go, yeah, it's expensive. I said, but it's okay. But the aviation was quickly getting to the point where owning the aircraft was not so much what it cost. It's I had to really seriously ask myself, I can afford to do, if everything stays the same, I'll be fine. What I really got to ask myself is, can I afford the next thing that breaks?
Yeah, no kidding. It's not, like I said, not just owning the aircraft. So the business I'm helping this guy to sell, he's got 18 owned aircraft, mostly from the 70s and 80s. So, but it's not just the 18 owned aircraft. It's the time to overhaul. It's the regular maintenance. It's the insurance. It's this. It's that. And it's like the 100 low lead. It's not your problem. 100 low lead is like $5 or $5.25 a gallon or whatever it is. It's the time to overhaul, right? And when they overhaul, and these aircraft 41 and 135 service, it's like overhaul. So you remove the engine, and the engines are $17,000 a piece, and they send them up to Canada to get them rebuilt. But man, oh man, what a headache! It's a fun business. I will tell you, they have a King Air C90, and I drove up there. I brought the owner of my company with me just to have a conversation about selling the place, and we both stood there and looked at that King Air. I had to get a napkin out to wipe the drool off my chin, and he looked over. He said, "This is the sexiest business you have ever introduced me to." And it's great. It's a lot of fun. But once the rubber starts to meet the road, and you look at the expense of buying a place, it's not cheap.
No, there's nothing inexpensive about aviation. That's for sure. And it's funny when you said $17,000 to replace an engine, and I'm thinking you got to say that again because right now, I mean, you measure the value of an airplane by where it is in the life of its engine. So for general aviation aircraft, the typical Lycoming and Continental engine is generally good. I'm speaking very generally here. People, the aviation purists will pick a fight here, but basically, the general aviation aircraft used in private aircraft generally have what we call a 2,000-hour time between overhauls, which sounds like a long time. And the average pilot who flies maybe 100 hours a year can get 10 years or so, 10 years or more out of an aircraft engine. The problem is right now to overhaul an engine or replace an engine can range anywhere from $35,000 to $55,000 for a typical general aviation engine.
Wow, I don't know if you're getting a good deal. I reserve the right to be wrong, especially not being a pilot. But my memory is he's paying $17,000. He sends his engines that need overhaul to Canada. He's got a guy in Canada, or a company in Canada, who will tear them down and do a total rebuild. And I think you're right. Every 2,000 hours is the TBO. Boy, this is from memory. So but it's Sunday night. I've had one drink of my allotted two, so I reserve the right to be wrong. I'm also also married, so I really reserve the right to be wrong. But I would swear he's telling me his cost for an overhaul, which just basically swaps out the engine, is $17,000. But like I said, I reserve the right to be wrong, and it wouldn't be the first time I was wrong.
Well, it's all about perspective in time, too, right? So the very first time I replaced an engine was in 1998. I bought a brand new Lycoming IO360, which is a 200 horsepower air-cooled four-cylinder engine, and the engine cost me $18,500. Brand new, drop ship from Lycoming Engines. Now that was 1998. That same engine today is about $38,000. So where were we in time when he paid $17,000? Probably back then.
I think it's current, and I think it probably is the net of the core value. So whatever the value is of the engine he sends up, he gets some sort of, if you will use a disgusting automotive term, it's a trade-in value for the core, I think. And then I think he nets out at 17, but again, I really reserve the right to be wrong.
Oh, yeah. So, there are core charges on aircraft, and in fact, most aircraft engines are quoted with a core, right? So, in other words, they assume you're going to send your old engine in. I couldn't, because the engine I replaced actually failed in flight. The engine was destroyed. It had no core value, so I lost out there. I ended up donating that engine to an A&P shop for mechanics to learn how to fix engines on. And yes, I made an emergency no-engine landing with that bad engine. That was in April of 1998, coming back from Lakeland, Florida. So that's what it cost in 1998. I then replaced my engine again in somewhere in the 2000s for around $27,000. And the engine that it was last in the airplane was approaching 1,000 hours. And the whole idea was to sell the airplane while it still was mid-time. So about 1,000 hours on a 2,000-hour TBO, because you can get a pretty good value out of your airplane if you sell it with still half of its life ready to go. So that engine, had I ran it out for the 2,000 hours, you end up with an airplane worth very little money, because the guy that buys it, the first thing he has to do is now spend $35,000 to $45,000 to put a new engine or overhaul or a reman. So, you are forced to do that math every now and again. KS1C, NJ2US.
Yeah, NJ2US, KS1C. Yeah, that's part of the valuation we're going through, and it's I'm kind of getting a flat spot in the front of my head. Now, he did, by the way, for the 18 aircraft he owns, he did go through VREF, part of AOPA, and they came back and they lowballed him. I mean, like, they obscenely lowballed him. And this guy has been at this for, he started in this business back in the 70s. And the guy knows what he's doing. He's a blue book evaluator. And they came back and just threw some numbers that were just obscenely low. But anyway, that's another story for another time. But I've learned a lot about aviation doing this. And we walk around, and I keep asking questions. And he says, you really should take your pilot's license. If you don't do a 141, do a 61 program. Like, yeah, but I've discovered over my 65 years that I have very serious difficulties with spatial relations, number one. Number two, I'm kind of ambidextrous, so terms like left and right don't really mean much of anything to me. And my great fear is I'm going to be in some, TCA somewhere, and ATC is going to say, turn left heading 275, and I'm going to turn right until I get to 275. And in the meantime, I'm going to T-bone a 737 and kill everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that you'll find some crossover, though, between, say, amateur radio or anything involving communications is probably one of the most disciplined forms of communication there are, to listen to a radio, to listen to radio operators. Some people might think it's 911 communications, dispatchers talking to police officers. Couldn't be further than the truth. That I ran a 911 center for 15 out of my 30-year career, and we're lucky the job got done. And these are very brave, very thoughtful people, especially the telecommunicators, like you said, they go through a lot. But I would never put cops and dispatchers in the category of truly professional, consummate communication professionals. Pilots, on the other hand, if you've ever sat and listened to an aviation band and monitored air traffic control communications between air traffic control and aircraft in flight, there you will appreciate the true discipline of good communications.
NJ2US KS1C, no kidding. So one of my favorite pastimes when I'm really bored and the bands are not very good is I will go to some of the transatlantic ATC frequencies, and they're mostly at Gander, right? So they call them Gander. And just for the fun of it, I'll catch a tail number, bang it into the computer, come up with flight aware, and I can see where they are. You know all the drill. You can see the origin, the destination, the altitude, the speed, and you can play back the flight path. For reasons I cannot explain, I find that really amusing. But they're not quite as rapid fire and sharp as the local airport. Because if you're halfway across the Atlantic and able to talk to Gander, which is I think 8891, I think 8.891 kilohertz. No, let's try it again. 8891 kilohertz, 8.891 megahertz. You get all time in the world, and so do they, because there's not that many aircraft they're in contact with. But boy, you get down to the like Boston Center or people like that, or Boston Approach. Those guys, they are barking out the orders as quick as can be, and you had better have your ears on, and you had better be really well attuned to that manner of speech, the rapidity that data comes at you, and better be able to read it back coherently. These guys are just like working CW. I'm good for 30 words a minute, maybe 32, 33. You come at me at 40 words a minute, I have no idea what just happened, Ted.
Yeah. Well, you said it. There's one thing you said in that transmission that really nailed what differentiates air traffic control communications from everything else, including law enforcement and 911 communications, and that is the concept of the read back. There is nothing more important in aviation communications than the read back. Every instruction given, whether it's the pilot to the tower to the aircraft, is always read back to catch the mistake. It's truly amazing to listen to.
Yeah, that's superior quality control. So I have a habit of watching YouTunes, and there are a couple of good aviation channels. One of them is Mentor Pilot, MENTOUR Pilot, and he flies the 737 for a European company. Don't know which, he never discloses, which is smart, by the way. And he talks about all sorts of different operational features and characteristics and problems of the 737. And then there's another one I've just found. It's a quick review. I think it's quick flight investigations, and he goes over what happened to particular flights and how it all went wrong. And sometimes it's as simple as something broke. I saw one just a couple days ago where it was a cargo plane flying military cargo, and they had all sorts of really, really heavy vehicles, and the loadmaster had not tied everything down appropriately. One of the vehicles rolled back on takeoff. They rotated. The vehicle rolls back, smashes the pressure bulkhead, and then smashes into the jack screw that handles the elevator, and they pitched up beyond control, stalled, and crashed, and everybody died. But I saw another one where I think it was a flight engineer, so I think it was a three-person crew in the cockpit, and the flight engineer just put in a typo on the takeoff weight, And it seems, well, that's come on, how much could it be off? Well, he was off by 100,000 pounds, and so the flight computer set thrust for an aircraft 100,000 pounds lighter, and sure enough, they tried to take off, and then they stalled, and then they crashed. There's so many ways for this all to go wrong.
You know, what's interesting about aviation safety, though, when you bring that up, is that the United States airline industry has achieved a long-sought goal, and that is a fatality rate that's riding, as an all practical matter, 0% fatality rate, which this country dreamed about 30, 40 years ago. But we've as an industry, we've approached that. Really, in the U.S., there's been, and God bless us all, and I knock on wood, but the industry, to their credit, and nobody really heralds this, maybe because it's tempting fate, but you have to congratulate the United States carriers for approaching what everybody thought was impossible. I remember the FAA setting a goal about 30 years ago of a 0 fatality rate, that would be the only acceptable number for aviation. And as a practical matter, and it's not discussed openly, but the industry has achieved that. Now, again, I'll knock on wood. I think people didn't even bring it up. We don't like to talk about it, but that is the reality. Now, that's not true of general aviation, as you probably know. General aviation has a horrible accident rate. Small airplanes, private pilots, that sort of thing. 141 ops, they can't make the same claim yet.
I wonder if 141 ops are significantly different than 61 ops. My guess, going in without even looking at the data, would say they probably are.
Well, there's, again, it's all about rules and how the rules are followed. Look at some pretty high-profile accidents. The basketball player, Kobe's flight was totally inexcusable. A professional commercial pilot, there's a problem there, right? One crew member, right? So that, and also not abusing, but exploiting a rule of what's called the special VFR. That's flight that can occur with special approval from ATC, and the pilot simply agrees to stay clear of clouds and have about a 1 mile visibility. Well, clearly the pilot on that aircraft is screwed up. But again, what would another crew member have brought to the table? So we keep learning, right? And we keep learning from these mistakes, and it's a pretty heavy-handed agency, the FAA, with regard to issuing its airworthiness directives and training mandates and rules. That all translates to expense. As you know, you're in this business, and that ultimately translates to what a passenger pays for his flight.
Yeah, NJ2US, KS1C. Yeah, clearly. But, in Kobe's case, sounds like the pilot was not cleared to fly into low visibility. And, they call it controlled flight into terrain, but what a devastating result. And that's the funny thing about aviation. It's a low-margin business. In many cases, you have such a low margin for error. Like the guy that punched in the wrong takeoff weight, and the flight computer set it to correspond with the error weight, and it was 100,000 pounds heavier than the computer thought it was. And these poor guys, they tried to take off. They hit V1, they hit V2, they rotated, and the plane was not really interested in climbing at all. They firewalled the throttles, and it was too late. Down they went, they stalled. So, but on the other hand, you're right. I mean, so you look at, the percentage of people that die in cars versus airplanes, and it's phenomenally safer to fly in any commercial aircraft. COVID aside, although I have a daughter-in-law who's a flight attendant on one of the nationals, and she tells me that she's counting on the HEPA filters to do their job, and I really wonder, is all that air that's exchanged several times a minute, is that really running through HEPA filters? I hope it is, and I hope she's safe, but I don't know. So here's my plan, Jeffrey. My plan is I'm going to live till I die. That's my plan.
there's a valid there's validity to following that plan, Charlie, and I certainly wish you the best on that. By the way, my ex-YL, who is now the forensic death investigator, in her previous life, she was also a flight attendant for Continental and Spirit Airlines, and actually Nations Air. She trained 3 separate times for 3 separate carriers, and I remember we were dating at the time when I met her. And ironically, I did not meet her through aviation. That's not how I came to meet her. And I remember having a discussion where we were talking about making a life together, and the subject of marriage came up. And I kind of lightheartedly said to her, I got to be honest, I don't think I could marry a flight attendant. And she says, "Oh no, my goodness. Well, I'm not married to this career of flight attending, so And I asked her, I said, "What would you have you ever had a dream in your life to do something?" And she says, "I would love to become something involving the forensic sciences." And I said, "Bingo!" Called a buddy of mine who was in a county medical examiner's office, and he had an opening for a morgue technician. I said, "Your first job to get down this road is to participate in autopsies and open up bodies. Do you got the stomach for it?" And she said, "Yeah." So that's how she gets started. That was my little segue between flight attendant and forensic death investigation. So I'm glad I think you said it was your daughter-in-law is the flight attendant. I wish her the best. That's an interesting career. It's fascinating. I don't know that I would have the patience for it dealing with the flying public. At KS1C, NJ2US.
Yeah, so that's exactly my thought. So it's funny. So flight attendants, they're just glorified cocktail waitresses and housekeepers right up until something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, they're the people who kind of direct you to save your sorry behind. So I will tell you this. My son flew out to... I reserved the right to be wrong again. I think it was Chicago with a bunch of his buddies from New England to go out and watch a Bruins game. And he was a designated driver. So all of his buddies are pounding down whatever they can get their hands on. And my son was a sober one. And the woman who is now his wife recognized that he was kind of cute, seemed kind of smart, he was pleasant, he was not smashed. And she slipped him her phone number. I mean, and here we are several years later, and it's all history.
I love the slip the phone number. That's how I met my wife. Ironically, I was on duty one day, and one of my guys, I was at this point in time, I think I was a lieutenant or a cap. I can't remember where I was, but I was a shift commander, and my guys were out there. And one guy, I remember we got a call from the sheriff's office that they were following a car that had a suspended vehicle registration. Not a big deal. It happens all the time. And one of my guys pulled the car over. I happened to be in the area, so I backed him up, which is very traditional. You pull up and make sure everything's okay. You never know. And it was my wife-to-be. She was the driver of the car, and she was dressed in speaking of cocktail server and flight attendants, because before she became a flight attendant, she was a cocktail server in an Atlantic City casino. And we chatted up a conversation. There was an instant attraction there, I have to admit, but I was on duty, so I was very polite, and I just thought, wow, woo, okay, this little heart went pounding, but I maintained my professionality. My guy gave her a ticket, sent her on her way, and about 3 weeks later, I am on duty again, and I'm passing through our municipal court. And I happened to spot her in the courtroom. I'm thinking, what the heck is she doing here? So I looked at the publicly posted docket, and I realized she was there. She had signed a trespassing complaint against her landlord, who entered her apartment without her permission, and it was kind of bad blood between her and the landlord. They were in a bit of a dispute, so she filed a complaint. And of course, I knew what car she was driving because I remember her from the car stop. And I did probably one of the boldest things I ever did in my career is I dropped my business card. I dropped my business card on her car in her car window, and I put it on the driver's side. And I won't say what I put in the note other than, hey, if you'd like to chat, like to have, can you meet me for coffee or something like that. So here's the best part. I didn't realize she was there with her boyfriend at court. I didn't see her with anybody. I assumed she was alone. So they come out of the court, and I was watching from inside the court through a window, and I noticed that she's with the guy, and he goes to the driver's side of the car because he was driving her car, and I watched him pick up the card, but he didn't read it, and he handed it over to her, and she took one look at it and quickly put it in her pocket. The rest is history, Charlie.
That is fantastic. So you came so close to losing that opportunity. If he had read the card, he would have just probably stuffed it in his pocket and thrown it in the gutter. That is fantastic. Oh, my word. So I'll tell you how I met my wife. We probably have a little commonality, but not quite so. So back in Boston, my wife was a nurse at a major Boston teaching hospital. I was a biomed tech, so my job was, if it's electronic and if it's in a hospital, I will fix it, calibrate it, test it, troubleshoot it, whatever. And I was there when we got the first intravenous infusion pumps. So, and they were new, and there were ways that you could mess up the setup so it would really be bad. So there are certain steps you had to take. You had to snap this disposable in just right, otherwise things would go terribly wrong. And so her boss, was she maybe director of nursing? I think so. She said, hey, you biomed guys, these are the machines. You have to go find every machine in the hospital every day and make sure the nurses have done it right. It's like, oh, for crying out loud. You're going to make me the nurse cop? Come on, man. So anyway, I did. And my wife was a nurse manager, so when I had to find every pump, if the nurses hadn't snapped everything together just right, I had to write up a little note and have the nurse manager sign it. So my wife was a nurse manager. And I walked up behind her one day. She was looking really stressed. So I just gave her a quick, shoulder and neck massage. Real quick while she was sitting there at a desk. Because now you'd be taken outside and shot for being a misogynist or something. But that was the first contact. We dated. On the first date, I knew she was the one. Like, no question in my mind. 6 months later, we're engaged. 6 months after that, we're married. And that was in 1979. So we're at 41 years and still kicking.
Good for you. That's a great story, and they're fun stories. I think the wives like to tell those stories more than the fellows do, but fascinating. And I got to meet quite a few number of biomed technicians. I never knew what a biomed technician was till I started work with this new company, and we install interoperability communications equipment in hospitals too. We did a large hospital project, and so I was project managing a lot of these deals, and I had an opportunity to go in. Ironically, this was in 2009 when we were dealing with the onslaught of what was then the Spanish flu, right? The H1N1 virus in 2009. And so we had a contract to install our interoperability equipment so hospitals could quickly contact first responders and law enforcement. And that's where I got to meet my first group. And everywhere I went, I got to meet the biomed techs at all of these major northern New Jersey hospitals. I'm trying to think of some of the big names up there in New Jersey, some of the big hospitals up there, and there's quite a few of them. Right? I mean, there's just dozens and dozens of hospitals all over the place. And I thought, wow, what a cool job, And I thought if it didn't work out with the company I was working for, I was going to try to get a job at a hospital as a biomed tech, and I just thought that would be a lot of fun. So, how long did you do that?
Well, I was in biomed for 10 years, and I guess my ultimate determination was it was the most enjoyable job I ever had. It was really rewarding, and I just couldn't make any money at it. And so I decided to get ambitious and climb the corporate ladder and get out into medical sales and all that. But I think being elbows deep in electronics every day, troubleshooting crazy things that just crazy things you'd never expect. I'll give you one example. I had a defibrillator that came back from one of the floors upstairs. They said, and And nurses, this is a classic nurse. They never really tell you what's going on. So the complaint was, it goes bang. Okay, this is on the sticky note, right? It goes bang. Okay, so you charge it up to 400 joules, you dump it in with dummy load. It kind of goes thunk, kind of a loud thunk. Like, is that what you mean? Do you mean thunk? Well, of course, you never know who wrote the note because they don't sign it. All you know is it goes, quote unquote, bang. So I sat there working this thing for hours. Like, I don't know, I don't see anything wrong. Charge, discharge. I had a dummy load. Charge, discharge, charge, discharge, over and over and over. And after, like maybe 50 cycles, 60 cycles, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know. I think this is one of those crazy nurse stories. I think this thing is working fine. I did one more, and sure enough, it goes bang like a shotgun. And it turns out there was an air relay, not a vacuum, but an air relay. And every 50, 60, 70 times you discharge it, the relay swings close enough to the capacitor, to a chip in the paint on the metal body of the capacitor, that it dumps the entire load, and it goes bang. And I'll tell you what, I jumped back so hard, I about fractured my spine on the lockers that were behind me. And you know what? She said it goes bang. Yeah. You know what? It does. It goes bang. And I about died trying to fix it.
Well, I always thought that, especially in the hospital and when I was working with a lot of these guys in biomed, that, most of the problems they encountered were the operator error type, right? That, they could usually count on a pretty high percentage of things just being the operator misconfigured or didn't understand the operation of a particular device. And that actual failures were pretty rare. But, of course, that's an example of something that actually, failed or moved or something, came out of its place and do that. But I used to think that I would love to. Now, see, you got to remember. So I was thinking about a biomed part-time job because I had just come out of 30 years of professional law enforcement experience. Rising to the top of my agency and wanting to take it easy and do something relaxing. So why not biomed technology, right? So money wasn't really the concern. I ultimately, of course, didn't pursue that, and I got a great second career with this company. I'm still with them, going into 13 years now. But I would love to have a job where they pay me well, where somebody's printer stops printing, right? That would be my favorite. The printer won't print, right? And they call you.
Well, that sounds good if you say it fast. My favorite story was, so I got into biomed out of high school. I was actually still in high school. I've always had a knack of being able to fix stuff. So I was 17, maybe 18. Running around the hospital, I was much taller. I was much thinner. I was much younger. Instead of having pencils in my pocket protector, I had screwdrivers because I fixed things. Dun dun dun! The hero is here to fix things. And we had there were two ICUs, a small one and the big one. So the big one, the nurse manager's name was Sherry. Actually, a really nice lady, but she had quite a bit of nurse ratchet going on. And she knew that I was 18 or 17, running around her unit with a place that was crawling with single nurses. And she knew where my mind wandered because she's not stupid. And so she was a little harsh with me sometimes, which is fine. She was actually a nice lady. I liked her a lot. But she had sent an EKG machine down to us because it was not working correctly. And I think I ended up changing out the EKG cable. So I didn't trust it. I think I maybe made it fail, and I said, okay, this cable's gone. Goodbye. So I sent the machine back up, and I got a call not very long thereafter. This bleeping EKG machine's broken again. Get up here and fix it. So I went up, and I disconnected the patient who was on a vent, and put the simulator on it. And the simulator's working fine. And I put the patient back on. Nothing. Put the simulator back on. It's working fine. And I finally had to say to her, Sherry, that isn't me, 18 years old, right? Talking to the nurse manager of a very, very high-powered ICU. And I said to her, Sherry, I don't know how to tell you this. I think the machine's fine. I think your patient is dead. And sure enough, she was.
Oh no! I thought there was telemetry that would let them know if a patient expires.
Well, yes, but this is back in 75. So there was no telemetry back then. It was all patient monitors, and the patient was on a vent, and so her chest was rising and falling and rising and falling. So she looked alive. She was being oxygenated, except for the fact that her heart had stopped, which is, sad for that patient. But here I am. I'm Mr. Nobody. And I'm talking to probably one of the top 10 most powerful people in a Harvard teaching hospital. And I'm the one, the 17 or 18-year-old kid telling you, Sherry, I don't know what to say. I think your patient's dead. Yikes.
That's incredible. Yeah, well, that's a good life experience, that's for sure. Charlie, we're losing the band. We burned it out. We burnt the band out. I suspect my signal has gone down to you. Conditions are changing quickly. I really enjoyed the QSO. I don't know where this is going to go, but I think we should probably sign. Hope to chat with you again. Got you firmly in the logbook. I really enjoyed it. Just want to double check the propagation. Are you losing me?
Yeah, you're down from a 10 over to an S7, but perfectly copyable.
Okay, yeah, and I hear you too, but it was a drastic swing. You were reliably 15 to 20 dB over S9, and I just don't want to let go of the key one more time, and you're just nowhere to be found. So let me pass along a 73. A pleasant good evening to you. Thanks a lot in common. Really enjoyed the QSO, and I certainly hope to find you again. I'm on 40 meters more than I am anywhere else. You can find me during the day up on ECAR 7255. You're probably not a net guy. I think you probably like rag chewing down band a little bit. So take care. Good to work you. KS1C NJ2US before we lose the band.
Okay, Jeff. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It was a lot of fun. And a lot of commonality and some other really fun stuff. So I really enjoyed it and hope to do it again. And I'm going to go down and refill. I've suffered a personal tragedy during this QSO. My rusty mill is now empty. I allow myself only two. As I say to my wife, how does it go from Monty Python? 2 shall be the number of the counting, and the number of the counting shall be 2. Not 3. Anyway, so I'm going to go down and pour another one. And really enjoyed it, Jeff. Nice to make your acquaintance. Hope to do it again. NJ2US, KS1C.
Super Monty Python reference. All right, Charlie, take care. Really starting to lose you. Band's fading out. Who knows? It'll probably come back in 10 minutes. Take care. We'll look for you again. KS1C NJ2US in New Jersey.
All the best, Jeff. Take care. KS1C's out.
Station calling again? May have been an Echo Alpha 5. Your call again? Echo Alpha 8 Charlie Whiskey Alpha. Is that correct? Alexis, okay, I got you. Very good. Echo Alpha 8 Charlie Whiskey Alpha November Juliet 2 Uniform Sierra. My name is Jeff. Juliet Echo Foxtrot. I'm in coastal New Jersey, South Jersey. Your report 5555. Alexis, over.
Okay, my friend, your signal in La Palma Island in this moment is high 9. I
What was the question, Alexis? Thank you for the 5-9. What was the question?
Your call, please. Repeat again your call. November Juliet number 2.
Okay, yes, my call sign, November, Juliet 2, United Sugar.
November, Juliet number 2, United Sugar. Thank you, my friend, for your...
Okay, thank you very much, Alexis. Good to work you. I think the band's improving in your direction. Your signal is actually coming up pretty good. 73. Thanks a lot for the call. Echo Alpha 8 Charlie Whiskey Alpha November Julia 2 Uniform Sierra.
Okay, my friend Chef, mi amigo Chef, thank you. Hasta pronto.
73. I'm still here, November Julia 2, Uniform Sierra. Again, Alexis, again, your signal is dropping now. Yes, I am a retired police officer, QSL. Oh, QSL, also on the job, Roger.
Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah, well, listen, you be careful. How long have you been on the job?
My job is in La Palma Island, in capital.
Okay, very good. Patrolling the capital, very good. And, well, you be careful.
I speak English very well, sir.
You speak English very well.
I speak English very much, okay, my friend? I view your okay, in this moment.
Okay, I lost that one, Alex. You faded on that. Say again.
Okay, my friend, un fuerte abrazo, my company, okay? 73.
Oh, 73, Alexis. Thanks a lot for the QSO. Echo Alpha 8 Charlie Whiskey Alpha, November Julia 2, United Sugar.